Hi, my name is Taylor Vande Velde, and I'll be speaking to you about the planning for profession as a community. Author of the book Community Planning, Eric Damian Kelly, states that planning is a rational way of planning for the future. The American Planning Association describes planning as working with residents and elected officials to guide the layout of an entire community or region. Planners take a broad viewpoint and look at how the pieces of community, such as buildings, roads, and parks, fit together like pieces of a puzzle, according to planning.org. The planning profession is generally bound by people's shared interest in the built environment, but also their technical skills. So beginning with characteristics that define the community, including it being a profession and also being multidisciplinary. You enter the profession with a degree, either master's or bachelor's. Some professional planners may not have a planning degree at all. However, you need to have a strong oral and written communication skill. You also need to have a wide range of technical skills, such as gathering and analyzing data, preparing communities for future trends, sometimes policymaking, and also community involvement. Planning is a complicated profession that has existed for just about as long as civilization has, but the context of the profession itself has changed with society, which is what I'll be going into next, which is the history of the community dramatically changing in America. The early planning consisted of Baroque planning, which also dealt with city health issues as well. So first being, Baroque planning is described in the dictionary as relating to a style of architecture and art. It generally focuses on displaying a city's power and strength to the people there. It usually used with very large monuments and dramatic town squares used in this type of early European planning. Examples of this include St. Peter's Square in Rome, and then also the Trevi Fountain in Italy, which is quite popular. However, in America, there was a lot of growing health concerns in the inner cities with the Industrial Revolution, drawing more people into work and packing them in a lot tighter than they had ever really been before. So sanitation and health ordinances were enacted to help these urban issues. However, other planning movements include 5 of them: City Beautiful, City Practical, City Social, Suburbanization, and the 5th one, Urban Renewal. So the first one, City Beautiful, is what it sounds like. It focuses on the aesthetics and beautiful nature of the city, such as parks and fountains. Movement kind of began in the early 1920s after the World Fair or World Columbian Exposition in 1893. Kansas City also has a really good example of this because we have quite an expansive parks and boulevard system, which really uses the principles of the City Beautiful movement. The second movement is the City Functional or City Practical movement, which is also strays away from the kind of frivolity of the City Beautiful movement and counteracts that with focusing on social science research and was considered a logical phase for planning, according to Mueller-Scott, author of American City Planning since 1890. The third social movement is City Social, which nearly rejected the previous movements altogether and focused purely on the human element in planning, which was spurred by the need for human rights, especially for housing conditions, which tenement laws and ordinances being packed help protect the health and safety of people in these really packed and condensed high-rise buildings. The fourth very important movement was the suburbanization of America. It was a very long process and it kind of coincides with the other movements, but it exploded in the 1940s after World War II ended. And this was sort of a shift from the public sector, such as municipalities and the federal government, planning housing, and kind of shifted towards these massive developments of planned communities planned by the private sector, basically. The last movement, which is Urban Renewal, 5th one, is actually a very destructive period in planning for inner cities that was actually encouraged by the federal government. Essentially, urban renewal was the federal government incentivizing for slum clearance for cities to rid of the unwanted areas. Unfortunately, this also happened to be where a lot of minority populations, predominantly African American residents, lived at the time. So a lot of displacement and a lot of mistrust has originated from that. However, current planning movements such as new urbanism and smart growth try and focus on good aspects of early planning, but also recognizes the harm it has caused. The new urbanism movement focuses on human scale urban design, but it also increases density, sustainability, walkability, mixed land uses such as office next to a home, and green transportation, quality of life, and also mixing of income levels and races to where it all kind of meshes together instead of having the segregated areas. The smart city movement is similar to new urbanism, but it builds on that concept with the preservation of open and green spaces and also making sure your decisions are financially responsible for the city. Mayor John Norquist of Milwaukee said the smart growth model is the convenient remedy for the inconvenient truth. So the history has allowed me to see the possibilities of the profession in the future, actually, which leads me to the point of my speech about my experience in the community. Has made me realize that planning is definitely a necessity for cities, but it's often confused with architecture, so I'm going to kind of clear that up. Architecture usually focuses on one building or a group of buildings next to each other, while planning can range from, a city block or a neighborhood or an entire city or even an entire region like the KC Metro or Midwest. I was originally studying architecture, but after talking with my Professor Jonathan Miller, we explored other design paths such as urban planning here at UMKC. So the distinction between the public and private sector is also important for the community because it's kind of different your role. Public sector is more hands-on with the public, and you really have to deal with political figures, which can cause a lot of tension and can be really frustrating for planners who want to do the best for the city. Private sector is, kind of the market and also has a lot of control over developments without having that tension with political figures necessarily. The professional planners employed in the private sector basically bid on developments to try and win them over. So they may not necessarily be concerned with their development and the impact of that on the city as a whole. So these planners often have to make decisions that are most beneficial to the client and their company versus planners in the public sector have to focus on what the best decision is for the community as a whole. So in conclusion, the planning profession combines many different skills, but the commitment to the community is key for a lot of planners. The history of the movements in the United States demonstrates how diverse and complicated the profession has been, as well as significant changes in values with societal values and then planning theory as well. But also my decision for pursuing urban planning was an important distinction of my career because the world will continue to grow, will continue to need to be planned for in the future, and our society needs people to help prepare for those foreseeable futures to ensure our community thrives in a sustainable and planned manner. So, thank you.